He tore my test in half, right there, in front of a full panel, and tossed it in the trash like I was never meant to belong. "Hi, I'm Loretta." And until that moment, I thought I was just here for a job interview. But it turns out I was walking into a setup, one planned by my own sister. You ever felt someone rewrite your story while smiling to your face? This isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when you stop being quiet, when you stop letting people define your worth. Tell me, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Drop your story in the comments, because what happened next changed everything. Let me take you back to the beginning. The air inside Della Systems was colder than I remembered. Not just in temperature, but in tone, in tension, in the way every surface gleamed like it wanted to reflect failure. Mine, specifically. I arrived early, resume folded perfectly, shoes tight, jaw tighter. It had been a week since Shailene last texted me. "Good luck tomorrow," she said, with that passive-aggressive purr only an older half-sister with a legacy to protect could wield. I thought it was strange she'd acknowledge my interview. I didn't realize it was a warning. The receptionist didn't find my name. I spelled it 3 times. The girl behind the desk twirled her stylus and gestured to the corner seat by the bathroom. "Just sit tight. Someone will figure it out." I sat, and in walked the parade. Suit after suit, polished, pre-approved, pre-loaded with Ivy League charm. One nodded at me like I was furniture. Then Shailene appeared. Click, click, click. Navy stilettos. Matched blazer. That silver Hamilton watch she only wore when she wanted to humiliate someone gracefully. Her eyes met mine. Nothing. No smile. She walked past the front desk, whispered something, then vanished into the private elevator. Before the assistant finally waved me in, I glanced across the corridor. Through the glass paneling, I caught Shailene mid-laugh, her head tilted back slightly, sipping from that same matte black mug. Reflected in the panel beside her was me, smaller, hazier, like a ghost framed beside a queen. For a moment, I thought about walking away. But that's the thing about growing up under someone else's shadow. You forget how tall you are until you stand alone. It hit me in the stomach, not like a punch, but like a sick, slow twist. She knew. Of course she knew I was applying. I told her. Over almond milk lattes, back when we were playing civil. She said, "Corporate culture can be cutthroat." Then she changed the subject. 20 minutes passed. No one called me. Eventually, a junior associate waved me forward. Late, disinterested. When I entered the room, the setup was already stacked. 5 panelists. Not including Shailene. Her chair was at the head. A matte black mug in her hand. No seat left in the circle. One was angled away, like an accident. It wasn't. I tried to move it subtly. It screeched across the polished tile like a protest. Every head turned, except hers. She whispered to Greg, Mr. Overconfident Ty, who chuckled. Introductions started. Ivy League, Fortune 100, buzzwords galore. When it came to me, no one looked up. I pitched. Grit. Solo wins. No gaps, just grind. Shailene flipped her pen. No follow-ups. Greg smirked. "Let's move on." It wasn't an interview, it was theater, and I wasn't cast. Then came her line. "Let's get real." Smile turned switchblade. She called on me first. No warning. "Loretta, why don't you kick us off?" I started. Barely. "I led a redesign of our data pipeline." She cut in. Led or joined? A laugh not meant for joy. Because last I checked, the implementation didn't land. A wave of chuckles from the others. "She's always had heart," Shailene added sweetly. "Just not always finish." My nails pressed into the folder in my lap. I didn't blink. I didn't shake. I burned. Quietly. Across from me, one of the other female candidates. Blonde, sharp suit, softer eyes, glanced my way. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hand hovered above the table like she wanted to raise it, to object, to say something. But instead, she looked down, scribbled into her notebook. Self-preservation. I couldn't blame her. This room had rules, and speaking up wasn't one of them. Greg tossed down a packet. Let's test real logic. He handed out case studies like party favors. I worked clean, sharp, on time. Then he picked up my pages, smiled, and tore them down the middle. We're not that kind of company. The room laughed. The room moved on. I stood. They thought I'd cry. They thought I'd leave. I walked into the hallway. 1 breath, 2. My phone lit up. Message from a former client. Not sure what's going on over there, but you should see this. Attached. A forwarded email. Apparently from me. Same signature. Same layout. Different souls. She's a liability in heels. I never wrote that. But someone wanted them to believe I did. Another message. My mother. Don't fight this. Let Shailene handle it. That was the last breath I took as a pawn. I sat down in the farthest stall and closed the lock with a soft click. The silence was dense, almost padded. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even shaking. But my throat ached with pressure. I thought about Christmas when our family slideshow played, and Dad skipped right past my college graduation photo. We only had so much time, he said, even though Shailene had 2 full minutes for her high school prom. Or that company All Hands where I created the launch deck, and she presented it as her own. Collaborated, she claimed. I was never mentioned. I stepped into the restroom, locked the far stall, pulled out a scrap of paper and wrote, "If they fake my words, I'll show them what the truth actually sounds like." Folded it, pocketed it, promised. When I stepped back out, I wasn't the same. And neither was the game. The next morning, I was at my desk by 7:13 a.m. Not that I had a desk, officially. But the same corner of a cafe 2 blocks from Delos Systems had become my mobile war room. Black coffee, burner email account. One goal, find the source. I stared at the forwarded message again. The language wasn't mine, too flippant, too reckless, but the signature matched perfectly. Same formatting, same closing line I always used. Let me know how I can support further. Except this version added, if she doesn't derail it first. She, as in me, it was a smear job, and someone had forged it to look like I'd tanked a client deal, likely as justification to block my hiring. The timestamp placed it right during my wait in the lobby yesterday, sitting beside a dusty ficus while Greg welcomed polished frauds upstairs. I narrowed the screen. Whoever sent it was clever. They hadn't just faked tone, they mimicked my phrasing, used email threading, even used a document I'd actually worked on as bait. But they slipped. The forwarding header showed a minor domain error in the relay, something only visible if you clicked View Source. And I did. Bingo. The relay was routed through the internal sandbox server. One used only for pre-launch testing, where employees sometimes staged drafts before publishing. Meaning whoever did this had access to internal infrastructure, not just access, authority. I pulled up my archive, filtering for any messages from Camilla, Shailene's assistant. There it was. A message from 4 months ago, subject line, for record-keeping only. Buried in the double C line, a quiet forward to the very same server. It hadn't registered before, but now, it screamed setup. I grabbed my coat and walked, fast. The streets of Austin were still cool from the night. Buses hissed, traffic yawned awake. I walked straight into Delos's side entrance using the guest badge Lyle gave me last year when I helped him prep for the Innovation Summit. I hadn't returned it. He hadn't asked. Security didn't question me. I walked straight through, past reception, up 1 floor, then veered into the IT alcove, a seldom-used corner with server access and barely monitored logs. The room was empty. I sat at a console, entered a familiar back door I remembered from helping the firm during a late-night crash last fall. My fingers flew. 10 minutes later, I was deep inside the metadata logs of the candidate evaluation database. The folder was called Q3 Eval Drafts Edited 2, modified 12 days before applications opened. Inside, a document with my name, comment line, flag for alignment review, under editor ID, S. Mays. I didn't exhale. I stared at that line like it might change. Then I printed it. Old school, paper feed. Watching the ink form her initials made it real. Footsteps behind me made me pause. I turned. Darcy. She looked startled to see me, more startled to see what was printing. I didn't speak. I just waited. I saw that file last quarter, she said quietly. Didn't know what it meant then, but it had your name. I nodded. You forwarded something to me too, didn't you? Her jaw tensed. I was told it was standard, a ghost copy. Shailene tell you that? Darcy didn't answer. She didn't have to. I slipped the printout into my folder and left the room. Not hurried, not afraid. Focused. In the hallway, I ran into Lyle. He was holding a coffee. Mine, in fact. Flat white, single shot, no foam. He handed it over without a word. I've escalated something, he said simply. To the board. Just be ready. I looked him in the eye. How long have you known? Not everything, but enough. We stood in silence. It was oddly comfortable. Then I turned to go. 1 hour later, I re-entered the lobby, not as an applicant, but as a problem. Camilla was at the desk, tablet in hand. She looked up, startled. Do you have 5 minutes? I asked softly. She hesitated. Now? I nodded. It's about a file. One I think you were CC'd on accidentally months ago. She swallowed, then said, Give me a second. 10 minutes later, I had her tablet in hand. She didn't stop me. She didn't even look up. The file was innocuous. Candidate review internal summary. But I knew what I was looking for. I clicked View Version History. There it was. Initial draft. Empty. Revision 1. Notes on scheduling. Revision 2. Flag Loretta M. Inconsistent follow-through. Editor. S. Mays. Time. 4:16 p.m. Date. 2 months before I applied. Device. Her assigned MacBook Pro. When I looked up, Camilla was watching me. I didn't know, she said. I just forwarded what she told me to. I know, I replied. You weren't the enemy. Her hands clutched the tablet tighter. But I didn't stop it either. I placed the tablet back on the desk. You still can. She didn't speak. But she didn't walk away either. By the time I left the building again, the folder under my arm was heavier than ever. Not physically, but in weight, in certainty, in direction. And for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing approval. I was chasing the truth, and I was gaining on it. Have you ever found out someone close to you was quietly sabotaging you all along, while smiling to your face? That kind of betrayal is different, doesn't it? If you've been there, drop a comment with the number 7 below. Now let's see what happens when the truth finally makes it to the surface. I returned to DLOS Systems the next day, not as a guest, not as a hopeful candidate, but as a loaded file ready to detonate. The folder under my arm was slim, but what it contained could crack glass. Security glanced at me. I nodded. My badge still worked. The elevator ride was silent. Floor 19. I stepped into the same corridor as yesterday. Same marble, same glass walls. But I didn't flinch this time. This wasn't enemy territory. It was the crime scene. Inside the conference room, the panelists were already seated. Greg's tie was brighter than yesterday. Shailene wore navy again. No accident. Power dressing was her second language. They didn't expect me. That was their mistake. I didn't sit. Not yet. Before we continue, I said, voice steady, I'd like to clarify something regarding my candidacy. No one moved, but I saw the shifts. A foot retracted under the table, a pen paused mid-spin, a throat cleared too late. It wasn't the words that landed, it was the certainty behind them. Even Greg, for all his smugness, leaned back instead of forward. Greg looked up, bemused. Ms. Mays, this is a scheduled panel, you weren't… I'm aware, I cut in. But considering the integrity of this process has already been compromised, I think the board deserves transparency. Shailene arched a brow, that performative calm that used to make me shrink. Not today. I stepped forward and placed a copy of the printed metadata logs at the center of the table. This file contains internal edits to candidate evaluations, specifically mine, made before the interview cycle even opened. The silence was sharp. Greg clicked his pen. Camilla shifted at the door but didn't move. Shailene blinked once, then smiled. There must be a mistake, she said. These internal documents are often touched by multiple hands. It's standard housekeeping. I cross-referenced access logs, I said. The edits were made from your assigned machine, Shailene. On a day you were scheduled in office, your editor ID is embedded in the file history. Camilla's face went pale. I'm not here to accuse, I added, looking at the others. But if this process values fairness, then let's let the facts breathe. Greg opened his mouth. Then, when the door opened and Lyle stepped in, it wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The air simply shifted, like a current pulled through the center of the room. I felt it first in my spine, then in the way Shailene's shoulders went still. Not stiff. Still. Like she'd stopped breathing. The door opened. Lyle entered. No announcement, no entourage, just presence. Like gravity bending the room. He walked past me, placed a slim folder of his own on the table, and looked directly at the panel. I'll be joining this review, he said calmly. As of this morning, anomalies in the HR database escalated to my office. Greg stiffened. Shailene went still. I believe the candidate has presented material evidence, Lyle continued. And in accordance with procedural audit standards, I'll be observing directly. Shailene forced a smile. Of course, we welcome transparency. The others stayed quiet, watching. I didn't sit. I turned slightly toward Camilla. You were copied on an internal forward 4 months ago, I said, regarding my application, before it was even submitted. She swallowed. Her eyes darted toward Shailene. Then, she nodded. That's true. Greg tried to redirect. Let's continue with the next assessment. No, Lyle said, firm but calm. Let's not. Then he looked at me. Would you like to proceed? I looked at the chair I wasn't offered the day before, the one they left skewed and too far out. I pulled it back with one smooth motion, no screech, no apology. When I sat this time, it wasn't permission I took. It was space. They handed out another case assessment. Logic test, business scenario, no calculators, no devices. Greg smirked as he dropped the paper in front of me. I didn't flinch. I worked through the problem silently. Clean math, clear thinking. Finished before anyone else. I placed my pen down. Greg took my packet, flipped through the pages. Great handwriting, he muttered again, then paused. I could see it. The flicker. Recognition. This time, he didn't tear it. This time, he looked up. And he was the one who flinched. Lyle stood. We'll pause here, he said. I need to review this with the board. Greg's mouth opened. Closed. Shailene stayed still. I gathered my things, not in defeat, but precision. As I turned to leave, Darcy caught my eye through the glass. She wasn't part of the panel. but she was watching. Her expression was different this time. Yesterday, she'd looked down when Shailene cut me off. Now, her eyes were steady. A quiet sort of witnessing. A choice is starting to form. She nodded. I stepped out and left the silence behind me. This wasn't over. This was only the opening statement. The air in the room felt thinner than yesterday, like everyone had forgotten how to breathe without permission. The chairs were realigned now, perfectly spaced, no accidents, no leverage points, just symmetry, sterile and false. Shailene entered last. Still navy, still polished. Her smile reached no one this time. She sat slower, measured. Greg greeted the panel like it was any other morning, like he hadn't nearly choked yesterday when Lyle walked in. But today was different. Not because they expected me, but because they couldn't ignore me anymore. I took my seat, without being told, without asking. Let's reset, Shailene said lightly. Her tone was smooth, but her eyes betrayed her. Shailene scanned the table, not with grace, but calculation. She was gauging reactions, tracking who still aligned with her, who looked unsure. And when her eyes brushed past mine, I didn't flinch. I stared straight back, unblinking. That was when I saw it. The shift in her pupils. Not confidence. Anticipation laced with fear. We'll continue assessments where we left off. Fresh focus. Greg added, and let's keep things on schedule this time. His gaze passed right over me, like I was background noise. They distributed another group prompt, another useless test of thought leadership dressed up as strategy. But no one moved. Not yet. Not until I did. I'd like to ask a question, I said calmly. Greg exhaled. Now is not the time. It is? I replied without raising my voice. Especially since yesterday's findings were neither acknowledged nor addressed. He froze. The others glanced toward Shailene. She smiled, but it was thinner now. As I said, we're resetting. Resetting doesn't erase records, I said. Then turned to Camilla. You have the internal comms drive, correct? Camilla blinked. Yes, but that's not protocol. From the back, a voice cut in. I have something, Darcy said. Every head turned. She stepped forward. No longer the background intern. She held up a small flash drive. I wasn't sure I'd ever use it, she said, voice tight. But this isn't safety anymore. Greg scoffed. You can't just... But Lyle, now seated near the wall, simply nodded. Load it. The assistant at the screen plugged it in. One click. A log opened. Chat messages. Internal thread. Greg's name. Shailene's. Timestamp. 2 hours before my interview. Greg. Derail her early. Ask about resume gaps. Hint at energy issues. Shailene. Perfect. She shuts down fast. Easy win. The room went completely still. No one blinked. Not even the ones who weren't surprised. Is this real? A board member finally asked. His voice was hoarse. Lyle didn't move. It confirms metadata, it's real. Greg hesitated before responding. His fingers tapped an inconsistent rhythm against his folder. He glanced down at his hands, then back at the screen. It was banter. Just internal shorthand, he said, voice tighter than usual. I let him finish. Let the sentence dangle in the air like a trap he'd walked into willingly. Then I said it. No. It was a blueprint. Shailene leaned back in her chair. You think exposing this helps you? All it shows is you can't handle pressure. I smiled slightly. All it shows is you've been rigging the pressure valve for years. One of the panelists, the one who hadn't spoken all week, finally leaned in. We'd like to see the camera feed, from the start of her interview to yesterday. Camilla looked up. That's available. Then pull it, Lyle said. A beat. Then the screen changed. There I was, walking in, being left out of the seating arc. No eye contact. No greeting. Shailene whispering to Greg. Greg smirking. My logic test handed, completed, and shredded. Every silent cruelty, now playing in high definition. When it ended, no one moved. When the video ended, the room didn't breathe. One panelist adjusted their glasses, not to see better, but to buy time. Another popped the cap off their pen and clicked it open, though the page before them remained blank. A third shifted in their seat, metal legs screeching faintly as they distanced themselves from the table, unconsciously perhaps, but unmistakably. No one looked at me. No one looked at Shailene. They only stared down, at the table, at their hands, at the evidence now undeniable. I'd like to speak, I said. No objection. I came here for an opportunity, not a performance. But what I received was choreography, designed to humiliate me, to erase me, and not because I wasn't qualified, but because I wasn't compliant. Silence. I turned to Shailene. You knew exactly what you were doing, from the falsified reviews to the planted rumors, and you didn't care, because erasing me made you shine brighter. Her jaw set. But she said nothing. You didn't just silence me, I said. You trained everyone else to look away. Darcy's voice was barely above a whisper. Not anymore. And that was the turning point. Greg tried again. This is being blown out of proportion. No, said the board member. This is proportion catching up to truth. He turned to Lyle. We'll initiate a formal review. Today. Shailene stood, not to argue, but to leave. For the first time, she looked small. I remained seated. Not because I couldn't rise, but because I didn't need to. Let them come to me now. I didn't sleep much the night before the final review. Not out of anxiety. Not anymore. What kept me up wasn't fear. It was precision. I kept replaying every log entry, every timestamp, every sentence that had ever been twisted into a noose and hung silently around my neck. And now, I had the rope in my hands. I walked into the boardroom early. Lyle was already there, standing by the window. Outside, the Austin skyline glimmered like a polished lie. Inside, we were about to cut into the rot. They know you're ready, he said, without turning. I'm not here for performance points, I said. I'm here for proof. He nodded. That's exactly why they're worried. The panel filed in slowly. Some looked at me. Most didn't. Shailene arrived last, coffee in hand, lips taut. She wore black this time. Still no eye contact. We sat. The board member from yesterday, gray suit, soft voice, steel eyes, opened the floor. Ms. Mays, he said, you claimed yesterday that a falsified communication was used to damage your candidacy. Do you have further evidence? I didn't answer immediately. I reached into my folder, pulled out the forensic audit report, passed it forward. This email, I said, was sent under my name to a potential partner. It includes language I have never used. It undermined a project I had proposed and supported. The file you're holding contains the metadata. Greg reached for it. The board member stopped him. Let's hear from the candidate. I stood, calm, grounded. The email was not sent from my machine, not from my account. But it was sent using credentials assigned to an admin device, one registered to Ms. Shailene Mays. The timestamp aligns exactly with a moment I was inside this building. Waiting to be called. I was never called. I stepped aside. The IT lead, brought in under Lyle's instruction, connected a laptop to the screen. Here's the sender IP, the device serial, the login logs, he said. All point to the same location, corner office, level 20. Authenticated to Ms. Mays's active session. The room turned colder. Shailene finally spoke. That machine is used by multiple team members. It's not unusual for logins to overlap. This could have been delegated. Lyle turned to her. Delegation doesn't include slander. Her face didn't twitch, but her nails clicked once against her mug. I'm sure there's context, she said. Things move quickly in fast-paced roles. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time she blinked too fast. You didn't just fabricate an email, I said. You erased me. Again. No one laughed. No one moved. The board reviewed the documents. No whispering now. No side glances. Just reading. Silent judgment. The board member looked up. We'll need to recess for 10 minutes. As they stepped out, Greg tried to follow. The member held up a hand. You stay. Lyle remained, arms crossed. Shailene sat still. Perfect posture. Not because she was composed, because she was bracing. When the board returned, they didn't ask questions. We have sufficient cause, said the chair. Effective immediately, Ms. Mays is suspended from internal access systems. A formal review will follow. As for Mr. Mercer, Greg flinched. Your involvement is under scrutiny. We expect full cooperation. Greg opened his mouth, then closed it. Again. Shailene stood, this time slower. She didn't slam the door. She didn't storm. She just left. Quiet. Controlled. Because that's how she built her world. Through control. And now it was slipping, one file at a time. I didn't gloat. Didn't smirk. I gathered my notes. Turned to the assistant at the table. Would you mind printing me one copy of the board statement? She nodded quickly. Lyle met my eye. You still want that corner office? I laughed softly. I want the one next to the dev team. Have you ever walked away from power, just to choose peace instead? That quiet moment when you finally stop performing and start living. If you've chosen dignity over status, drop a comment with the number 9 below. Let's see what happened next when I finally claimed space on my own terms. He smiled. Outside the room, Darcy waited. Was it enough? She asked. It was true, I replied. That's more than they expected. She handed me something, a folded scrap of the original assessment Greg had torn. I pulled it from the bin, she said. Felt wrong to leave it there. I smoothed it out, a crease down the middle, but the ink still held. I folded it again, and this time, I kept it. A week later, the office felt different. The glass still gleamed, the marble floors still echoed, and the elevators still hummed like nothing had changed. But people moved differently now. Eyes met mine, heads nodded. Even silence no longer felt like erasure, it felt like acknowledgement. They offered me Shailene's corner office. It had the best view in the building, glass on 2 sides, mahogany desk, polished stillness. But I turned it down. I'd rather be closer to work, I told HR. So they gave me a desk on the 7th floor, between the dev team and a vending machine that ate dollar bills. No corner view, but I liked the noise. I liked the friction of people building things in real time. That afternoon, I pinned 2 things to the corkboard above my monitor. One was a torn fragment from the technical test Greg had shredded. The other was a post-it. This is what reclaiming space looks like. No applause, no headlines, just truth. Settled and steady. Camilla stopped by once, nervous. She didn't apologize, but she said, I didn't know what to do. I know, I said. Darcy dropped in too. She'd been transferred out of Shailene's oversight. You stood up, she told me. Now it doesn't feel like we have to disappear to survive. We didn't talk long, but her words stayed. And then came the emails. Not from the board. From old clients. From vendors I'd worked with in side gigs. We're watching, they wrote. We see you. One even said, would you consider leading a collaboration? I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But I smiled. Later that week, I returned to the cafe 2 blocks from Delos. I used to come here after job interviews, when I still thought job titles equaled purpose. I sat with my coffee, hoodie up, phone on silent, watching people walk past glass. I didn't feel invisible anymore. I felt planted. That's when the text came, from my mother. Just 5 words. I saw what they did. No apology, no excuse. But something had shifted. The next day, I received a message from Ethan. I was wrong, he wrote. About a lot. I'm sorry I didn't stand up when it mattered. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because this story, it was never about revenge. It was about return, to voice, to worth, to presence. One afternoon, as I updated sprint notes on Trello, someone slid a note under my keyboard. No message, just a single drawn checkmark. I stared at it for a long time, because sometimes impact isn't loud, it's quiet, but clear. A few days later, Camilla and Darcy asked if I'd mentor a junior intake group. They should know what leadership looks like, Camilla said. I accepted. Not because I needed recognition, but because I knew the cost of silence. In the team huddle that Friday, someone asked me, "How did you not give up?" I smiled. I did, I said, but only long enough to see how it felt. Then I came back different. They laughed. A real one this time. And as the meeting broke and voices rose in happy noise, I sat still for a second. Not because I felt out of place, but because, for the first time, I didn't. This wasn't a win. This was a beginning. And I was finally the one holding the pen. I no longer sit on the sidelines or stand behind anyone. After everything, I've reclaimed my space, not through compromise, but through truth. My peace didn't come from being forgiven, but from no longer asking for permission to exist. I've learned that some silences are designed to protect the guilty, but sometimes it only takes one person to stand, and the entire system has to shift. Justice doesn't always arrive early, but it arrives if we stay steady and refuse to lose our voice. If you've ever been pushed aside or overshadowed by those who seemed untouchable, share your story below. I want to know, who did you have to reclaim yourself from? And if you're still in the middle of your storm, believe this: chaos doesn't last forever, but dignity, once you hold it, will always be your starting point for something stronger.